There you go. So Chief Brunacini used to do an incident management symposium every fall in Phoenix, and he would bring together, different people to speak. And I had the opportunity to hear in one of the symposiums, I had an opportunity to hear Dr. Gary Klein speak. And if anyone's not familiar with Dr. Klein, he kind of originated the model of recognition prime decision making. He's written a good number of books, but so I had the opportunity to listen to him and then to actually speak with him after the conference and talk to him about kind of what I was looking to do with simulations and how that might be more effective. And so we kind of took his recognition prime decision making model and tried to figure out a way that we could incorporate that into the training that we were doing. And so he was a great resource. And so, we started building simulations that were just, they were still pictures, but we had a question set that we had everybody go through as they were doing them. So it was kind of a pen and paper type of simulation. But it was, my experience anyways was that it was an extremely effective way of training folks. And particularly, in the fire service, one of the big issues we have is, people get promoted to company officer, and how do you get them up to speed quickly? And how do you get them so that they're making good decisions on the fire ground? And the other real question too is, how do you, even in a busy department? Now, Albuquerque's a fairly good sized metro department. I mean, it's not huge. We have 700 firefighters and out of 23 stations. But how do you expand people's experience base? Because there's no way you're ever going to roll in first to every type of event that you're going to go to. And so that was another use of the simulations, was to, we can build simulate. So one of the things that I ended up doing was just, we'd have a battalion chief meeting, and we'd just say, okay, well, what are the buildings that keep you up at night? If this thing was on fire at 4 a.m., would be the type of target hazards that we started building simulations around. And that's not to say, like, when we're doing company officer training and we're just bringing or doing certifications, we're doing fairly simple stuff. But at the battalion level, we started just looking at the target hazards that, that you wouldn't want to be, you wouldn't want to show up and the thing would be on fire at 4 a.m. And so we're able to look at those type of things and kind of expand people's experience base. And so, I think one of the things that Klein talks about in his recognition prime decision-making model is that that's a model that describes how experienced incident commanders make decisions. And so the model is basically, when you roll into a scene, that scene produces certain cues. And if you've gone through the BlueCard program, it's what Chief Brunacini always referred to as the critical fireground factors. What's the building size, the configuration, what are the fire conditions, what time of day is it, the rescue profile, all the kind of things that we incorporate into a size up. And so Klein would say an experienced person recognizes the critical cues, and then from that is able to, look at the situation and see certain patterns. Okay, so this looks like something that I've seen before, and so you can go back and relate what you're seeing to something that you've already experienced. And so the kind of analogy he was using at the time was, it's like another slide in that carousel of slides. Nowadays, people don't use the slides anymore. I guess we call it one more file in the hard drive or whatever, how, to kind of bring it into the digital world here. But one of the interesting things is that through the simulation training, you're able to create those slides or those digital files, and your brain doesn't know your brain really doesn't know the difference between stuff that you've studied, the simulations you've been through, or the real events that you've gone to. All of those things end up, being resources that you can draw on the fireground. And so having a robust simulation program if it's done correctly, I think is one of the most effective ways to get people up to speed, expand their experience base, and get them comfortable in the job too. And so that's kind of how I've been involved in it.
I agree with you, Ted. When we first started doing our command training, before the BlueCard days, it turned into, me being a young training officer, going around taking pictures of residents. And to be honest, it was whoever was conducting the training, whoever they didn't like that night, they picked on them and kind of set them up for failure with, unrealistic events. What I really like about simulation-based training is we try to make it as realistic as possible and show, as close as we can, real fire behavior, and you can cater it towards your organization. So, we're not Albuquerque out in Big Sky, Montana, we're two engines for 45 minutes. So we try to base our simulations on that for 45 minutes until we get some help. So you can make it as realistic and as robust, and especially as I'm sure you're going to talk about, with these platforms out there, you can really make a very, very good simulation that can even challenge the most, seasoned officer on the scene.
And I think, you just hit on a really important concept, and that's the idea of context. So you have to build the simulations around the context that you're working in. A couple of weeks ago, I was up in a small town in Colorado doing some BlueCard certification stuff. And I mean, they're kind of sounds like, Big Sky. You get a couple of units and you're going to be there for a while before the automatic aid arrives. And so, you have to build the stuff around what resources you're bringing to the department or to the event. The other thing I like about the different programs is that you can use your own buildings, and there's nothing that makes the training more relevant to people than having stuff in your own first due. It's one thing. The BlueCard simulations are interesting, but a lot of people, I've heard, we don't have buildings like that here or whatever, and it's one of those things. If you can, once you're through the initial certification, I mean, I know our program in Albuquerque is all based on the buildings from our own jurisdiction, and so it just makes the training that much more relevant. If you may show up at this thing, definitely perks up people's interest in the program. I think the other point that you made that I think is really important is that the sim lab, and this is a cultural thing, and it's really, it's a tough nut to crack, but the sim lab has to be a safe place where people can make mistakes. And that's the whole, one of the things that we always tell people, you want to make your mistakes in here, not out on the fire ground. And so it has to be a place where it's okay to screw the thing up, and, we coach people and get them back on track. And a lot of times, in the fire service, you make one mistake and now you've got a nickname for the next 30 years, it's so, sometimes it's a tough, cultural nut to crack to get people to say, hey, we're here to learn. It's not, it's not a test. And like Seth just said, I've seen instructors who've built simulations. It's like a whack-a-mole game. You put the fire out here, now it's showing over someplace else. and they're just scenarios that nobody could successfully complete. And that's not what we're trying to do with the training. You're trying to get people to move, in a positive direction.
So Ted,
and that's not to say that they can't be challenging either.
So Ted, how does that roll into using simulations for non-technical skills? So how would you quantify that? And
so
go ahead.
So I think, one of the things that sometimes people aren't aware of is, there's certain types of skills that you can teach with the simulations. And there's other things that simulations just don't work for. If you want to teach people how to, get good at pulling a crosslay or putting on their gear or doing, SCBA stuff, you've got to go out in the drill ground and do that. But the stuff that you can do with the simulations, we kind of break it, I call it non-technical skills, but we kind of break it into two different areas. One of the things is, one area is social skills. So those are things like communication, and anyone who's been through the BlueCard program understands that. It's a very highly focused on fireground communications. The other two things are leadership and teamwork. So, it's that whole thing about command presence and then working together as a team. So those are kind of the social aspects that you can train with the simulations, but there's also cognitive parts of it too. And that kind of goes to what Klein was talking about as far as decision making. So decision making skills, situational awareness, and then finally task and workload management. How do you manage, multiple, priorities on the fireground? And I think, that's one of the key elements of any system that you're trying to build on. I think the BlueCard's a good example of that. A lot of it's just focused on managing the span of control for the incident commander. And so, but those are the kind of skills that you can hone using incident simulations.
Yeah, something that's been very effective for us is during the last week of our academy. So we do what we call an operational readiness academy to get them up to speed on how we do things here. But that last week, we let those students be involved in the simulation lab that our BlueCard commanders are getting checked off in. So they see what they're about to go through in years to come. And that's super effective because that shows A, how we do things, B, what the communication model looks like, and on and on and on. But those guys being the brand new guys that are about to hit the streets already understand from a command level what the expectation is and what we're doing. And we found that to be very successful for us. They're coming in pretty green, coming in, just worrying about pulling hose, where all of a sudden they're in these BlueCard command simulations, and it's worked really well for us.
And I think, that's another really good point is that, and even if you're working like with new company officers, one of the things that when we bring them in and run through the sim lab, we always have experienced people run through one first and model it. This is, so I think a lot of times instructors forget about that, is that you really want to model for the students what you want them to do. So if you're doing something like a simulation, having the instructors do it and kind of setting the bar high really helps kind of, set the tone for the training. People get to say, okay, that's what they want us to do. That's what it should sound like. And I think that's a really important aspect of doing this, is always to try to model, the best practices, good, clear and concise communications. Yeah.
Yeah, something
that's an important point.
Something that was really powerful for me to learn from Nick was that don't ever set up your officers for failure in front of the team, right? So make sure that you're showing what right looks like and getting your officers trained up. So when we're doing it with the troops in the boots, that that everybody's on the same page. We're not having arguments in front of everybody on a command level, on an officer level. And I've really tried to stick true to that. And it's really been helpful for us because we work out all the kinks, not in front of everybody, so to speak, you know? So Ted, how did, you know, in the you know, the current state of affairs with training being extremely challenging on a multi-company level, how can we benefit from simulation training, and how can we do that station to station or remotely? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, up until recently, that was kind of a tough, you know, a tougher thing to do, because, you know, if you look at kind of the format of the BlueCard simulations, they were, so for people who aren't familiar with them, it's, so basically you have multiple companies. You may have 3 engines, a ladder, a battalion chief, as part of the simulation, but each one of those is a different simulation. And so people that were remote, so if you tried to run the, I mean, there are some ways that you can kind of do that over Zoom even, but where an instructor can kind of control it a little bit better became a trick, because those are really time synchronized simulations. So everybody kind of logs on at the same time, and then people arrive in a staggered order, kind of like you would do it on the fireground. But there are some tools now, you know, with some of the different software programs. I'll talk about Fire Studio first. Now, Fire Studio has a module that's called the communications link, or the comm link. The comm link allows one computer to control a large number of other computers or iPads. And so people can kind of log into the simulation. And so from a central location, someone can actually, you know, manage, and you can see where everybody's at in the simulation. And so and you can run that over a local area network. And so for departments, now we have it in our sim lab. We don't use it a whole lot because most of the time, if they're up in the sim lab, we've got them all there. But you can certainly, in these days, people can, as long as they have the Fire Studio player software at the fire station, and the player just allows people to play the simulations. The students can't alter them or create new stuff with it. But if they have the player version at the station, they can log in, and then someone, you know, at the battalion headquarters or whatever, or at the training division, can drive the simulation from there. Now, and there's also other ways to do stuff remote. I'll demo one here in a little bit. That you can, you know, one of the things that I really like is, you know, it's hard, even in our department, to get everybody up into the sim lab. You know, the training time where we can pull people out of service and get them up to the training center is, you know, it's pretty tight between the mandatory training we have to go through. It's, you know, it's hard to get big blocks of training where we can run people through the sim lab. And so we found other ways to, you know, do that remotely. And one of the things that I like to do it, folks, is, I mean, I'll demo one here in a minute, is create stuff that the student can run themselves. So it's a sim that you can just, you know, kind of run through. And I've actually created, there's a bunch of them on the fire engineering website. You know, after this, you know, webinar, if you want to go and take a look at those, if you just put from their engineering website under the search, just say simulations and put my name, Ted Nee, and there's probably 10 of them on there right now. And you can kind of see that sort of format. But the other software packages, how many people are using Sims You Share? That's another fairly common. I mean, I think Fire Studio and SimsUShare are probably the two most common software packages that people are using. Now with SimsUShare, they've just recently, Jonathan Kay, the owner, has introduced they have a command training center module now, and so you can do kind of it's very similar to the ComLink in some ways, where the instructor can kind of drive the simulation, but Jonathan's taken that another step past that, where he's built in the ability now where you can email or embed simulations. You could embed simulations into a website and it's fully functional. Someone can log into it even without the SimsUShare software, and actually, if they know how the sims work, they can navigate and run through it. So that ability to embed it into a website then allows you, if you're using like Target Solutions or some other learning management system, you can actually plug the sims into that and they're fully functioning, which is kind of that's kind of a cool thing too.
Yeah,
of course, people have to be familiar with, how it works, but it's not it's a fairly simple process. In order to do that, you can do it from the Command Training Center module. There's a place where you can select a sim, and then either you can create a link to it directly, or you can embed it into, like I said, into a web page or into your learning management system. So that's kind of
maybe we can show
another way to do it.
Maybe we can show these guys an example. I'm going to make you presenter now, so you can share your screen.
Okay.
And you should have control of the mainframe there.
Okay. There we go.
Awesome.
All right. So I have a sim in Fire Studio here. So let me just bring this one up. Now, this is kind of what we would call, I think in the BlueCard terminology, they call it a set and rep, but this is just an example of something that you can do with the program. So this one here, Engine 1, Engine 2. Here, I'll let it play. I don't know if you can hear that.
1 and Battalion 1 respond to 10,200 cores bypass. This will be at the Home Depot. We have a report of a fire in the loading dock area with sprinkler activation. All units responding to 10,200 cores bypass, switch to TAC channel 1 and acknowledge en route.
So this one I have set up so the dispatch plays when you bring it up, and then you just click start. And so this is something that, a company officer or someone who's getting ready to take a promotional exam or whatever can actually run through themselves. So we have the Home Depot here. Try to make it as wide as I can. So these are just approach shots that I took as, driving around the place. So when they get to this point here, we just tell them, give your initial radio report. So it'd be, Engine 1's on scene at the Home Depot. We've got smoke showing from a loading dock on the Charlie Delta corner. Engine 1 securing a water supply. We'll be stretching in through the side Charlie for, the initial fire attack. Or in our case, like in our department, we have kind of a specific SOP for these kind of bigger buildings, and it's called enclosed structure SOP. So that's what we would be initiating here. It's kind of like the big box sim, but here you can hear as other units arrive, we cue them to assign those units. And so it could be, command to engine 2, bring in a second water supply, spot on side Charlie. You'll be, we'll be standing by to make entry.
Level one.
So as other units arrive, you just start plugging them into your scenario here. So in a case like this, someone can practice all of those, because really, what is it you want a company officer to do, when they arrive on scene? Give a good size up, assign their unit, assign the next couple of units as they come in, give a follow-up report like in here. Now, once we're inside, we've got, fire in the high bay storage. We're got sprinkler activation. We're knocking that, we're hitting the fire now from a safe distance. Whatever you would normally require in your department as part of a follow-up. So this one kind of runs along, and then we have a time. So here's the battalion chief's on scene. So now we just cue them, make a command transfer. And so you can run these and have, maybe 4 people just role play those positions and then just kind of rotate through them. And a lot of these I've built where we just made the first 4 units as separate simulations, and then you can do it around the kitchen table. So you could work it as a company, or you can do it kind of like we've done it here, where one individual could kind of role play all the radio reports themselves. So engine 1 can then give their cam report. They've got, fire control. They might need somebody to shut down the sprinkler system.
Hey, Ted, Chris had a question of how much this program costs. We just upgraded ours because we just switched around our sim lab. So I can't remember what we just paid for. I think we just got like 6 new licenses plus an instructor kit. So ballpark figure, somebody getting started wants to set up, 4 iPads or 4 computers plus somebody with the actual software in their computer. What do you think that's going to cost them?
Oh, well, I think like the software, generally, if you're going to buy like a package, you can go to the digital combustion website for Fire Studio or to the SimjaShare website for SimjaShare, and they have the prices there. I think generally the instructor version of Fire Studio runs about $800, and then the iPad players run about $200.
Yeah,
and then of course you've got to get the iPads, but you don't have to have the latest greatest one. So one of the things, like, this is a good time to buy iPads because in the fall, in September, Apple has their big unveil of new products. And so, if you go to Best Buy or something like that, they're trying to get rid of the old ones before the new ones come in. So, and you don't need like the pro iPads. You just need a regular old iPad, to run the software.
Yeah, I think it's important to say too, like, with the software that comes, it's kind of up to you, and that's what Ted's, the authority on in the country is making simulations, which is complex to say the least. But you can make them very simple or very complex, like this short little one that Ted's showing you here. But you can just take 4 sides of a building and get it up and running on digital combustion once you're well versed in it, in under 30 minutes for a training. Like, I'm not kidding you. And then you just make, smoke and fire showing from alpha side, 2nd floor, and go. And then as long as you have 4 sides of it or 3 sides of it of pictures that you can upload into your computer, it's really seriously that easy to do once you get a little bit savvy with the platform, which Ted's showing right there. When you start putting your own engines or firefighters in there or pulling ceiling, that's where it gets a little bit more complex and a little bit little bit more tricky. But the value behind it, which kind of leads me into the next talking point here, Ted, is what is the value for the end user for this, and what do you think the biggest benefit of using either SimsUShare? And as a side note, with SimsUShare is very easy to use on the call. So this is a great classroom version, and then SimsUShare, you can have it on your phone, which I do, and we'll go to a false alarm, and I'll just take 3 pictures real quick, put it in a SimsUShare on my phone, and say, okay, let's war game this out. What do you think the value is for the end user, Ted?
Well, I think the real value is in the. So one of the things that one of the other areas that I found real interesting was, how do you, so we took kind of what Klein's kind of concepts about recognition, prime decision making, and then kind of looked at that in the context of training. And so what's the most effective way to train people and develop their level of expertise? And so we began, like the thing that we just showed you there, that's something that you can do that we would call like deliberate practice. And so that's kind of like the sets and reps. And so what deliberate practice is taking so getting people kind of outside of their comfort zone. And I think anyone who's been in the hot seat in a simulation, whether you're the first due person or you're the first arriving battalion chief, knows that even though it's a simulation, people get amped up. It's something that makes you nervous. You're performing in front of your peers. Nobody wants to look bad, and so you get people out of their comfort zone. And then what we do is we give them, and then we work with them and give them good feedback. Like on that last sim, if we just took them back to the give your size up report, give your initial radio report here. So if someone is given their radio report, we have a standard format that we use, because we're doing the BlueCard too. And so if they miss part of it, then we could come back in and say, okay, that was okay, but I can pause this simulation. So even if I'm in the present mode, if I hit the space bar, I can pause this. I can say, okay, let's stop for a second. That was good. You covered almost everything, but you didn't give us a good description of the building. So let's go back and let's do it again. This time, what's the element that I really want you to make sure you give us? And the person will say, hey, tell me how many stories it is or whatever. Like they made us, so whatever they missed, then they can go back and you give them the feedback. And you keep doing it. So the idea behind deliberate practice is, you get people out of their comfort zone a little bit. Not, you always kind of want to work at that edge where people are just a little bit uncomfortable, and then, give them good feedback and then keep working at it. I mean, there's only one way to learn how to command the fire ground, and that's to practice doing it. And since, we know that we never know how many calls we're going to get. And so I think that's the huge benefit in this, is that you can hone those skills and get and expand your experience base. It helps you to develop, to stay calm on the fire ground. And that's another area that I've been working on lately, is just what are the mental aspects of this? And so we're teaching people, some breathing techniques, how to box breathe so that they can calm themselves down, so that they can, run an incident without their, adrenaline taking off. And so, there's a ton of things that you can build into this.
It's what it did for, what I think is very powerful about simulation training and BlueCard in particular, is it standardizes how we're going to go about doing it. So it's not just winging it on the fire ground. So you can, just like Ted was saying, that you can stop at a size up and say, okay, we want these 5 to 7 things on every size up. And it should be so automatic that when something is different with your size up, then you'll be able to cue in on that. And same thing goes with strategies and tactics, you know, and it forces the conversation within your organization of like, no, we need to be all on the same page and standardize the way that we're doing these things, from size up all the way to stabilization of the incident, you know. So it's hugely powerful because it forces the conversations that everybody doesn't really want to have unless you have a curriculum in front of you.
Yeah.
You know, when I was doing simulations,
and that's
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, it's, you know, and I would just say there's kind of one caveat to that. You have to have some kind of system, and I'm not trying to sell a BlueCard to anybody. I mean, we use it because we've been kind of using Phoenix's Volume 2 since the 1990s. But you have to have some system in order to be able to train with the simulations. You have to have some kind of incident management system that you're plugging into that becomes the standard for the organization. So, and I think that's a great point, Seth.
Yeah, Chris just asked, does anyone give feedback to real calls to improve performance? You know, every call, I shouldn't say every call, every high acuity call, we're debriefing before we part ways on that at the end of the call. So, Chris, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very important. You know, we always try to do some sort of tailboard review before we leave the scene, because the senior people, you know, an experienced person sees things differently than inexperienced people. And they may have picked up on a cue that now that person can share with the group. So the next time the younger, you know, and that's what we try to even do with these simulations.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so you can start the, like on this building, you know, how tall is the, you know, what's the roof line on this thing? You know, so if you look at the roof scuppers here, so that's the level of the roof. So you've got, you know, a 6-foot parapet there. So if you just threw a ladder up there, you're gonna jump over you jump off a ladder and you're going 6 feet to get to the roof. So, you know, just being able to recognize stuff like that is something you can teach in the simulations, but it's also something you can teach at the end of a call on the fire ground.
Yeah, the curriculum behind it, again, I'm a big BlueCard guy, so I'm going to promote it again, but the curriculum behind that, each simulation is really important because it says, this is what we're going to try to do, and it gets everybody on the same page, so there's no argument in the classroom around the coffee tables. This is where the first line's going, this is where the second line's going, and I think everybody after going through these simulations will agree that, you know, the tactics or the strategy are sound. And I think that's an important piece, because going back to, you know, when I was beat in submission as a young company officer, I was always told what I was doing wrong, and there's no curriculum behind it. It's just the mood of my predecessor, you know. So, well, good. How about other questions?
That's an excellent point.
Hey, Ted, what do you think the biggest challenge is for simulation-based training?
You know, and so, I mean, and for full disclosure, I mean, you know, people know that I'm the kind of the lead instructor for digital combustion, but I've also built content for Jonathan at SimsUShare. But, you know, I think that one of the toughest things is, you know, unfortunately, this is what I see all the time when I go out to teach people how to use Fire Studio, is the chief goes to some conference, he sees the software, he's like, oh, that's great, and then buys the stuff, brings it back to a department, and hands the program to the busiest guy in the fire department, who's typically the training officer. And so, you know, that person's already overwhelmed, and now, you know, he says, oh, I want to run an assessment center in 2 weeks, so, you know, build me 3 simulations, and the person doesn't even know how to open the software. And so I think, you know, that's one of the issues. But and so there is a little bit of a learning curve with both of the programs. And so let me go ahead, let me open one up from here. I want to give everybody equal I'll just bring up a real simple one here. Well, actually, I've got a million things on here, but so one of the things is, the person has to have the time to do it. And what I've seen is the departments that have a really robust program, it's typically someone is into it and takes, and kind of, takes it personal control of it or takes ownership of it. And that seems to work the best. Let's go with the multi-sim one. So this is kind of a similar thing to what we were just looking at, except this is like a multi-unit simulation. So you can build very complex things with SimsUShare too. This is just one I built for Jonathan for the CTC, and here you can select any piece of apparatus that you were assigned to. So we'll just put people on engine 1 here. But you can see you can build very similar type simulations with both programs. But I think the tricks is just spending a little bit of time to get to learn how to use the program, and then starting small, and then working and then building bigger stuff. You can't start by, the first time out of the box, you can't build a giant assessment center. You've got to do, I think what you were saying, Seth, do it 360, get 4 sides of the building, and, start from there. Have someone size it up, do it 360, and then you can discuss it. You may make a couple of transitions in the simulation, but that gets people started and kind of used to it. The way we built ours is kind of, it just, and I've been doing it for a long time, but I just learned the hard way. I've made every mistake you can make, doing this stuff. And so, it's one of those things that there's a little bit of a learning curve, but I think the programs, as they've developed, right now, Fire Studios on version, I'm actually was running the beta of version 6.5, and every time we upgrade it, we're trying to make the instructor tools even easier to use. So that's, we're trying to make the program more powerful, but also, make it easier for the person who's building the thing to be able to build the simulation out. This should be advancing. But anyways, so there's a bunch of, both the programs are quite different, but they have a lot of the same features. So you can plug it, the key thing I think is putting in your own pictures, and you can build your own clip art. So you can put your own trucks and stuff in there. And I know people, our firefighters like that, seeing their own, stuff in there. Let me see if there's any.
Yeah. So what I like about digital combustion is the power behind it and the professionalism in the classroom when you're doing sim labs. What I like about SimsUShare is you can, no joke, you can go to your training tower and put smoke and fire from a window, so everybody's seeing the same thing before you run your simulation, your live drill, and say, okay, here's where the smoke and fire. Look at my phone, look at my iPad, go. And that's what I really like about it. And like I was speaking to before is that, we run a false alarm. I can put smoke showing from the 3rd story of an apartment building that we just ran a false alarm, and I'm like, okay, so where are we going to stretch it? Where are we going to go? What's our access points? Where are we going to plug in? All that kind of stuff. So they both have great opportunities for immediate and planned training. Now,
SimsUShare is the way Jonathan's configured it now. It's the player part of it. The basic part is a free download, like for your iPad or your Android device. But then the CTC part and the ability to build, more complex stuff, it's an annual subscription. And some people like that, so it's easier to budget than buying everything on the front end. So it kind of depends on, how you want to do stuff. And, just to throw a plug in for myself, every year at FDI, at least for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been teaching a 4-hour workshop on simulation design and development. And so if anyone's interested, hopefully by April, I don't know, who knows with what's going on here, but hopefully we'll be able to reconvene in Indianapolis this year, or next year rather. And so if anyone's interested, we spend 4 hours, and I make a lot of the materials available to the students, so you can kind of take stuff home with you and build from there.
Yeah, that class is awesome, by the way. So if anybody has a chance for that, it's awesome. And maybe in the future we could maybe put a webinar together for the ISFSI platform, but we can talk about that in the future. Well, with that,
Sure. I mean, I would be happy to do that.
Yeah. We're kind of getting to the finish line here. Does anybody else have any more questions for Ted while we got him his undivided attention here? Super awesome having Ted with us today, because he is definitely the lead authority in this subject matter for the fire service. So I really appreciate you taking the time out, Ted. It's a big deal to me. I know everybody's time is super valuable, especially everybody's busy with their own lives right now, especially with this weird state of affairs. With that, Ted, do you have any closing remarks before we call it?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks to the ISFSI and the USEF for having me today. And if people are interested in the simulation stuff, I just think it's a tremendous training tool, and if it's done right, I mean, the back end of this is the result of it, and that's a safer fire ground. It's people that feel more comfortable. It's expanding people's experience base, and those are, I think, great goals for any training program that's doing professional development for your officers and battalion chiefs.
Yeah, I agree. I really think it's super powerful, and we don't do it enough, and we try to do it as much as possible. So I think it's just out there about sets and reps and making time for it, because it is important. And my experience too is the guys love it. The guys love having the good conversation, and they're into it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not a hard sell on the fire ground.
Yeah.
I mean, in the training division, people wanna, as a matter of fact, just a short thing before we finish up. One of the first times we started doing kind of a little remote thing with the iPads, brought it to the station. I figured it would take about an hour, and we just had the company officers at one of our headquarters stations, and it was amazing. Everybody, including the probationary firefighters, wanted to have a chance to do it. And
Awesome.
So like 3 hours later, I was like, hey, I got to get out of here. So it's not a hard sell at all.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ted. Thanks everybody for showing up, and we'll see you guys next time. 2 weeks from now, we'll have our next happy hour, and I believe Chief Frank Lieb from FDNY is going to talk about training in his organization. So stay tuned for that. And Ted, thank you so much for
Great. Well, thanks.
spending the afternoon with us. And everybody stay safe out there, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys next time.
Great. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.